The story begins on a quiet morning in Los Angeles. The city was alive with its usual rhythm, but inside a small home, Sandra Bullock sat by her window, staring at the sky. It was her birthday, a day that was supposed to feel special, but inside, her heart there was a quiet heaviness. The years had been kind to her in some ways, giving her recognition and fame, but there were moments when even the brightest lights could not fill the silence. She thought of all the birthdays she had spent smiling for cameras, surrounded by people, yet feeling strangely alone when the day ended. That morning she whispered to herself, almost like a child, "I wish this year could feel different. I wish someone could remind me that even simple kindness can make a day unforgettable." She did not know that life was about to answer her wish in a way she could never imagine. Miles away, Keanu Reeves was finishing his early routine. He had always been known as a man who kept life simple despite the weight of stardom. People admired him for his humility, but few understood how deeply he valued small acts of care. He remembered once telling himself, "Kindness does not need to be loud. It just needs to be real." That morning, he had heard from a mutual friend that it was Sandra's birthday. Without hesitation, he felt a soft pull in his heart. He thought of the years they had shared laughter on sets, the bond that had formed while filming stories that touched millions. He remembered how she had once told him, "Birthdays never mattered much to me, but I always dreamed of one that felt warm, like family." Those words had stayed with him. So on that day, he decided he would not let her sit alone with her thoughts. As Sandra sat still, the doorbell rang. She almost ignored it, thinking it was just another delivery, another card, or some flowers sent by someone she barely knew. But when she opened the door, her breath caught. Standing there, holding a small box with no ribbon, was Keanu. He smiled, in his quiet, gentle way. The kind of smile that made you feel safe. "Happy birthday," he said softly. No cameras, no crowd, no noise. Just two people standing face to face, sharing a moment that felt more real than anything Sandra had experienced. "In years," Sandra laughed nervously and asked, "What are you doing here? You didn't have to come." Keanu shook his head and replied, "I wanted to. Sometimes the best gift we can give is time. I thought maybe today you shouldn't feel alone." Inside the box was nothing fancy, no diamond, no luxury. It was a handwritten note and an old photograph of them from years ago, taken during a break on a film set when both of them were laughing so hard they had tears in their eyes. Beneath the photo, Keanu had written just one line. "Moments like this are worth more than gold." Sandra felt her throat tighten. Her eyes filled with tears, but not the kind that brought pain. They were tears of gratitude, of remembering that in a world full of noise and endless expectations, there were still people who valued the simple truth of being there. The day unfolded slowly, with them sitting in her living room, drinking coffee, sharing stories, and laughing over memories. For Sandra, every hour felt like a gift. The loneliness she had woken up with was replaced by warmth she had long forgotten. And for Keanu, the joy came not from grand gestures, but from watching someone he respected feel seen and valued. Yet, beneath the laughter, there was something more. There was an unspoken depth, a hidden weight that both carried. Both had lived lives that the world envied, yet both knew the quiet battles of loss, heartbreak, and resilience. It was in that shared silence that the real gift of the day appeared. It was not just about a birthday. It was about reminding each other that no matter how heavy life became, kindness could always make the weight lighter. That evening, as the sun went down, Sandra whispered, "This is the birthday I will never forget." Keanu smiled and answered, "That is all I wanted." But neither of them knew that this day would only be the beginning of something deeper, something that would unfold with twists they had not expected. Because sometimes, a single act of kindness opens doors to truths long hidden, and the journey, of two souls begins in ways neither can control. The night after her birthday felt different for Sandra. She lay awake, her heart still carrying the warmth of Keanu's unexpected visit. It was not the gift that stayed in her mind, but the feeling of being seen and valued without judgment. She realized how rare it was to find people who gave without expecting anything in return. As she closed her eyes, she thought, maybe life still has ways to surprise me. Meanwhile, Keanu walked back through the quiet streets, his thoughts heavy. He was glad he had gone to see her, but something inside him whispered that it was not only about her birthday. It was about reminding himself, too, that connection mattered more than anything fame could buy. As he reached his home, he placed the leftover photocopies back in a drawer. In that drawer were pictures of people he had loved and lost, people who had shaped him but were no longer there. He whispered softly, "I hope I made today better for her because maybe she needed it as much as I once did." The next morning, Sandra woke with a sense of curiosity. She sent a short message to Keanu, thanking him once again. She expected nothing more, but to her surprise, he replied quickly. "How about we meet for lunch? I know a small place, quiet, away from all the noise." She smiled at the thought, realizing that maybe this was more than just a casual visit. They met in a small cafe on the edge of the city, the kind of place where nobody cared about Hollywood names. It was peaceful, filled with the sound of soft music and the smell of fresh bread. Sandra looked around and laughed. "How do you always find these hidden places?" Keanu shrugged. "I prefer simple spaces. People forget that the quietest corners often give the most peace." As they talked, Sandra shared something she rarely admitted. "Sometimes I feel like people only see me for what I can do on screen. But when the lights go off, I feel invisible. Yesterday, you reminded me that I still matter, even outside of the spotlight." Keanu listened, his eyes soft but steady. "I know that feeling too well. When you lose people you love, when you walk through grief, the world looks at you, but never sees the pain inside. Sometimes the only way to survive is to keep going, even when you don't know how." His words struck her deeply. She knew about the pain he had carried, the losses that shaped his silence, but hearing him speak so openly felt different. It made her realize that the strength people admired in him came not from perfection, but from his resilience through tragedy. The cafe became a sanctuary that day. Hours passed as they shared not only memories of laughter, but also wounds of the past. Sandra spoke about the times she doubted herself, the nights she cried alone, and the fear of being forgotten despite all the success. Keanu spoke about loss, about learning to smile even when his heart was heavy, about choosing kindness because he knew how much it mattered. There was a moment when Sandra looked at him and asked quietly, "How do you do it? How do you carry so much pain and still stay kind?" Keanu paused, then answered, "Because I know what it feels like when kindness is missing. I don't want anyone else to feel that." Those words stayed in her heart like fire. She realized that behind his calm face was a man who had chosen kindness not because life was easy, but because life had been hard. And that choice made his presence even more powerful. When they left the cafe, Sandra felt lighter, as if she had shed years of unspoken fears. Yet deep down, she also felt something unexpected. It was not romance, not yet. It was something more, fragile, more precious, the beginning of trust. But life, as always, had its way of testing people. Outside the cafe, as they walked toward their cars, a group of paparazzi suddenly appeared. Flashing cameras surrounded them, shouting questions, turning a private moment into public chaos. Sandra's heart raced, fear rising as she whispered, "This is why I never feel safe." Keanu immediately stepped closer, shielding her with his body. His calm voice cut through the noise. "Stay behind me." He did not push or fight, but his quiet strength made the cameras pause. His respect for her privacy, his refusal to let the chaos touch her, became another gift she never expected. Later that night, alone in her home, Sandra replayed the day in her mind. She thought of the cafe, the words he had spoken, and the way he had protected her without anger, only with respect. She realized this was more than just a friendship being renewed. This was something life was building slowly, with meaning, with depth. And yet, in the shadows of her thoughts, a question formed. Why did it feel like fate had placed Keanu back in her life at this exact moment? What was life preparing her for? The next few days moved quietly, but inside Sandra's heart, there was no silence. She kept thinking about Keanu, about his visit on her birthday, about the cafe, and about how he had shielded her from the chaos without anger or pride. There was something about his presence that felt steady, like a light in a dark room. It had been years since she felt that kind of safety. One evening, she sat on her couch, staring at the photograph he had given her. Her fingers brushed across, the faded image of their laughter from years ago. Suddenly, she realized something. She had forgotten what it felt like to laugh without worrying, to feel joy without pretending. Keanu had reminded her that it was still possible. She whispered to herself, "Why now? Why is he back now?" It was as if life had chosen this exact moment to bring him closer, and she could not understand why. Keanu, on the other hand, was restless in his own quiet way. He did not live with noise or distraction, but Sandra had stayed in his thoughts since that birthday. He remembered the heaviness in her eyes, the way she smiled to hide the loneliness. He told himself, "I cannot fix her life, but maybe I can walk with her through it." Still, he wondered if he was ready, because carrying someone else's pain meant opening his own wounds again. Their connection grew slowly, naturally. They began to meet more often, always in quiet places away from flashing cameras. Sometimes they would sit in silence. Sometimes they would laugh for hours, and sometimes they would talk about the parts of their lives the world never saw. Sandra once told him, "People think success takes away pain, but sometimes it only makes it worse." Keanu nodded and answered, "Pain has no interest in fame. It comes to everyone the same way." But soon, life tested them again. One afternoon, as Sandra was walking out of her home, she saw a group of reporters waiting near the gate. The questions they shouted were sharp, personal, filled with rumors. One voice called out, "Is Keanu your new love? Are you hiding something from the world?" Her chest tightened and her breath grew heavy. It was the same fear she had always carried, that the world would twist her private life into a story she did not choose. Later, when she met Keanu, her hands were still shaking. She tried to hide it, but he noticed. "They were outside your house, weren't they?" he asked softly. Sandra looked away and whispered, "I can't breathe when they do that. I feel like I'm trapped, like they own my life." Keanu stayed quiet for a moment, then spoke. "They don't own you. They only own the noise. But you still own your silence." Those words struck deep. Sandra stared at him, her eyes wide. "But how do I live in silence when they won't leave? Me alone?" He smiled gently. "Then you don't fight them with silence. You fight them with truth. Truth has a way of breaking noise." His words gave her comfort, but they also frightened her. Truth meant opening wounds, sharing parts of her life she had hidden for years. Was she ready to do that? The tension between them grew heavier, but it was not the kind that pushed them apart. It was the kind that pulled them deeper, forcing them to face emotions they had buried for too long. There were nights Sandra sat awake, asking herself if she could truly trust someone again. And there were nights Keanu sat alone, wondering if he was strong enough to carry both his pain and hers. One evening, while walking together in a quiet park, Sandra finally let her guard down. She stopped, turned to him, and said, "Do you know why your visit meant so much to me? Because I was ready to spend my birthday alone. I told myself nobody cared enough to show up. But you did. You walked through my door, and for the first time in years, I felt human again." Her voice broke as tears filled her eyes. Keanu listened without interrupting. Then he placed his hand gently on her shoulder and said, "Sometimes life gives us people at the exact moment we need them. Maybe this is that moment for you. And maybe it is that moment for me, too." They stood in silence, but it was not empty. It was full of emotions neither dared to name yet. The world around them felt smaller, and for a few minutes it was just two souls holding on to the fragile truth that maybe they were not as alone as they thought, but destiny had not finished with them. In the days that followed, new challenges began to rise. Not from the outside world, but from within themselves. Memories of past betrayals, fears of being broken again, the weight of all the unspoken stories, they began to surface, testing the fragile bond that had just begun to form. The days passed, and the bond between Sandra and Keanu grew stronger. What started as a simple birthday surprise had now become a quiet thread holding their lives together. They met often, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for long walks, and sometimes simply to sit in silence. Neither of them needed to fill every moment with words, because their presence alone felt enough. Yet, inside both their hearts, there was a storm. Sandra often thought about her past, about the mistakes she had made, and the scars she carried. She feared that if she opened her heart too much, she might lose everything again. She whispered to herself at night, "What if I let him in, and he leaves? What if history repeats?" Keanu carried his own shadows too. He had built walls around his heart, not to keep people out, but to protect them from his pain. He told himself, "If she knew the weight I carry, would she still stay?" His life had taught him that love and loss walked hand in hand, and he was afraid of dragging someone else through the darkness he knew too well. One evening, as they sat in a small bookstore cafe, Sandra leaned across the table and said softly, "Do you ever feel like life waits for the right time to test us?" Keanu raised his eyes, his expression calm but thoughtful. "Yes," he answered. "Life always tests when we least expect it. But sometimes those tests are the only way we discover our true strength." Those words stayed with her, but she didn't know that the first test was already near, a few days. Later, Sandra received a message from a journalist she had known for years. The message was simple, but sharp. "We know about your meetings with Keanu. The world deserves to know the truth. If you don't speak, we will." Her chest tightened as she read the words again and again. Fear ran through her like cold water. She had worked so hard to protect her private life, to guard her heart from being turned into headlines. Now it was slipping out of her control. When she told Keanu about it, he remained quiet for a long moment. Then he said gently, "The truth cannot destroy you if you own it. Don't let them use your silence against you." But Sandra shook her head. "You don't understand. They twist everything. They will not just talk about me, they will talk about you. They will turn our lives into a story that isn't ours." Her voice broke, and her hands trembled as she spoke. Keanu reached across the table and took her hand, steadying it. "I don't care what they say about me. I only care about how you feel. If you want to walk away from all this, I will respect that. But if you want to face it, I will stand beside you no matter how hard it gets." His words calmed her, but they also scared her. Because in that moment, she realized something she had been afraid to admit. She was starting to need him, and needing someone meant risking heartbreak again. That night, Sandra stood by her window staring out at the city lights. She remembered the loneliness of her last birthday, the emptiness she had felt. Now, only weeks later, her life felt completely different. Keanu's presence had brought warmth, laughter, and courage she thought she had lost. But was it safe to let her heart believe again? The next morning, the headlines appeared anyway. Photographs of her walking with Keanu in the park, grainy shots of them leaving the cafe, and bold words that shouted, "Sandra and Keanu, secret meetings or something more." The world exploded with curiosity. Fans filled social media with endless questions, rumors spread like fire, and reporters camped outside their homes. Sandra's fear came rushing back, stronger than before. She whispered, "This is what I was afraid of." But when she called Keanu, expecting him to sound troubled, his voice was calm. "Let them talk. We know the truth, and the truth is ours. They cannot take that from us." For the first time, she felt that maybe she didn't have to face this storm alone. Maybe, just maybe, they could walk through it together. But fate was not done. Just as she started to believe in that hope, an unexpected twist came. One evening, as they were leaving a quiet dinner, a stranger stepped forward from the shadows. He wasn't a reporter, but his eyes were sharp and his voice was cold. "You think the world will let you live quietly? You don't know what's coming." Sandra froze, fear gripping her heart. Keanu stepped forward, placing himself between her and the stranger. His calm voice cut through the night. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man only smirked, whispered something too low for Sandra to hear, and walked away into the dark. Sandra's breath shook as she clung to Keanu's arm. "What did he say?" she asked, her voice breaking. Keanu looked at her for a long moment before answering. "He said, 'Some truths are more dangerous than lies.'" The night after the stranger appeared, Sandra could not sleep. Every time, she closed her eyes. She saw his face, heard his sharp voice, and felt the chill of his words. "Some truths are more dangerous than lies." The sentence echoed in her mind like a riddle, pulling her deeper into fear. She whispered to herself, in the dark, what truth was he talking about? What could be so dangerous? Keanu, however, remained calm on the surface, though inside he carried questions of his own. He had lived long enough to know that life often sent shadows when light began to grow. But this was different. It felt personal, as if someone had been waiting for the right moment to strike. He told himself, if there is something coming, I need to protect her from it, no matter what it costs. The following day, Sandra tried to go back to her normal routine, but the presence of reporters outside her home made every step heavy. When she walked outside, cameras flashed, questions flew, and the noise became unbearable. She rushed back, inside, her chest tight, her breath shallow. Later that evening, she called Keanu with trembling hands. "I can't live like this," she said softly. "I feel like the walls are closing in." Keanu arrived at her home within an hour. He carried no gifts, no flowers, only his steady presence. As he sat with her in the quiet of her living room, he spoke gently. "You are stronger than you think. I know it feels like the world is closing in, but sometimes fear grows louder than reality. We have to face it together, or it will own you." His words soothed her heart, but she could still feel the weight of the stranger's warning. She looked at Keanu and whispered, "But what if he was right? What if there is something we don't know, something waiting to break us?" Keanu met her eyes and answered firmly, "Then we face it when it comes. Fear is only a shadow. It disappears when truth stands in front of it." But as he spoke, Sandra noticed something unusual in his eyes, something unspoken, almost hidden. It was as if he knew more than he was admitting. The following week brought a storm of attention. The media refused to let go of their story. Interviews, articles, and endless speculation filled the internet. Some people celebrated the idea of Sandra and Keanu being close, while others spread cruel rumors. Sandra felt her strength slipping away. "It's not the truth that hurts," she told him one night. "It's the lies they create. They paint a picture that isn't mine." Keanu nodded quietly, then said, "Lies can only live if we let them. Truth is heavy, but it sets us free. As the days went on, they found comfort in small escapes, secret walks late at night, quiet drives to the countryside, and hidden moments where the noise of the world could not reach them. In those moments, Sandra began to see something more. In Keanu, not just a friend, not just a man who showed kindness, but someone who carried his own pain and still chose to give light. Yet the shadow of the stranger's words never left her. She started noticing small things. Unmarked letters slipped into her mailbox, anonymous calls that ended the moment she answered, and faces in the crowd that lingered too long. She told herself maybe it was only her fear playing tricks, but deep inside, she knew it was real. One evening, as they sat together in her home, Sandra finally asked him, "Keanu, when the stranger spoke to you that night, did he say more than you told me?" Keanu was silent for a long time. The silence itself felt heavy, stretching through the room until it hurt. Finally, he spoke. He said something I didn't want you to hear. He said the world is waiting to reveal a truth about us that we may not be ready for. Sandra's breath caught. About us? But there is nothing to reveal. We're just... Her voice trailed off as her heart raced. Keanu looked at her, his eyes steady but filled with something she could not read. Sometimes the world creates stories. But sometimes it also finds truths we've hidden even from ourselves. She stared at him, her chest tight, her mind spinning. Was he hinting at something? Was he holding back a truth she didn't know? The weight of the moment hung between them, fragile and dangerous. Sandra felt torn between fear and trust, between wanting to run and wanting to stay. That night, as she lay in bed, her thoughts circled endlessly. What truth could be so dangerous? Is it about him, or about me, or about us both? And somewhere in the quiet of that night, she realized something she could no longer deny. Keanu was not just her friend. He was the person her heart had begun to lean on, the person her soul feared losing most. And maybe, just maybe, that was the truth. The world was waiting to tear apart. The days that followed felt heavier than ever. Sandra tried to smile in public, tried to act as if nothing had changed, but inside her heart, there was a storm. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every whisper felt like a warning, and every memory of the stranger's words echoed in her chest. She kept asking herself, what truth could break us? What is he hiding from me? Keanu noticed her unease, though he carried himself with calmness. Inside, he was fighting his own battle. He wanted to tell her everything, but he also feared that if he spoke too soon, the weight of the truth would crush her spirit. Still, he knew the silence could not last forever. One night, as they drove together through the quiet streets, a black car followed them closely. Sandra noticed it first, her breath tightening as she whispered, "That car has been behind us for 10 minutes. Keanu checked the mirror, his expression steady but serious. "Don't worry, stay calm," he said softly, but his hands gripped the wheel tighter. The car finally turned away, but the fear it left behind lingered. Sandra's voice shook as she asked, "Who are they? Why are they following us?" Keanu sighed, his silence louder than words. The next day, an envelope arrived at Sandra's home. There was no name, no address, only a single sheet of paper inside. The words were short but sharp. "You cannot hide the past forever. The world will know." Her hands trembled as she showed the letter to Keanu. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening. Sandra searched his face for answers. "What past are they talking about? Is this about me or about you?" Keanu finally looked at her. His eyes filled with a sadness she had never seen before. "It's about both of us," he whispered. Sandra's heart pounded. "Both of us? But what do you mean? I don't understand." Keanu stood, pacing slowly, across the room. He finally spoke, his voice low but firm. Years ago, during the time we worked together, there were choices made behind the scenes. Things that were hidden. People close to us knew truths we never faced. And now, someone wants to use those truths to hurt us. Sandra shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. But what truth? Tell me, Keanu. I need to know. He hesitated, then finally said, They believe there was more between us back then. Not just friendship, not just work. They want to turn our history into something scandalous, something dirty. But it wasn't like that. You know it wasn't. Her breath caught as old memories rushed back. Long nights on set, private conversations, moments of laughter that felt deeper than they admitted at the time. She realized that maybe the world could twist those moments into a story they never told. Sandra's voice cracked as she whispered, So they want to destroy us with our own memories? Keanu nodded slowly. Yes, they want to turn kindness into weakness and trust into shame. The weight of his words broke her. She sank into the couch, her hands covering her face. I can't do this, Keanu. I can't fight them. I'm not as strong as you. He moved closer, kneeling in front of her. His hands gently pulled hers away from her face, his eyes meeting hers with steady calm. You are stronger than you know. I've seen your strength. I've seen how you rise even when life tries to break you. And I'm not asking you to fight. This alone. I will stand beside you until the end. Her tears fell freely now, not only from fear but also from something deeper, relief. Relief that she was not alone, that someone had chosen to stand with her even when the shadows grew darker. But before the moment could soften, her phone buzzed. She picked it up, and her blood ran cold. A new message had arrived, this time with a photograph attached. It was the picture Keanu had given her on her birthday, the old photograph of them laughing together. But across the image, in bold black letters, someone had written, The world will see the truth. Sandra dropped the phone, her heart racing. They have the picture. How? It was only in my house. Keanu's face grew hard, his eyes sharp with realization. Someone is watching us more closely than we thought. The room fell silent, the air thick with fear. Sandra looked at him, her voice trembling. Keanu, what if this isn't just about rumors? What if they want to destroy more than our names? What if they want to destroy us? Keanu placed a hand gently over hers. His voice was calm, but his words were heavy. Then we must be ready, because this is no longer just about the past. It's about the present, and it's about protecting each other, no matter what it takes. The night after the photograph arrived, Sandra sat in her living room with the lights dimmed, her hands trembling as she held a cup of tea that had already gone cold. She could not shake the feeling of being watched, of her private world slowly breaking apart. She whispered into the silence, Why us? Why now? Keanu sat across from her, his calm presence a shield against the storm. He knew that fear was growing inside her, but he also knew that running away would only give power to the shadows. He leaned forward, his voice steady. We cannot let them own this. They want to twist our truth into a weapon. The only way to stop them is to speak before they do. Sandra looked at him with wide eyes. You mean, tell the world ourselves? He nodded. Yes. Tell it with our voice, not theirs. We don't need to hide what is real. What we had in the past was friendship, trust, and moments that mattered. If we stand together, no lie can destroy that. Her chest tightened. The thought of facing the world terrified her, but his words lit a spark of courage inside her. She remembered how he had shielded her from cameras, how he had given her comfort on her birthday. how he had stood steady through every storm since. She realized then that he was not just her friend, he was her anchor. The next morning, they made the choice. Instead of waiting for more threats, they sat together in front of a simple camera and spoke openly. There were no lights, no scripted lines, only honesty. Sandra began softly, her voice shaking but clear. For weeks now, there have been stories about us. Stories written by people who don't know our truth. I don't want to hide anymore. Keanu came into my life on my birthday, not to create scandal, but to remind me of kindness and friendship. What we share is trust. It is not for sale. It is not a rumor. It is ours, Keanu added quietly. We cannot control what people say, but we can choose to be honest. Our bond is built on respect, on resilience, and on kindness. If the world wants to see that as something else, let them. We know the truth. They uploaded the video, and within hours, it spread everywhere. Some doubted them, some twisted their words, but many more saw the sincerity in their eyes and believed. Fans wrote messages of support, reminding them that honesty was stronger than noise. For the first time, Sandra felt the weight lift from her chest. She whispered to herself, "We did it. We faced it." But the story did not end there. Days later, the same stranger appeared once more, this time at a distance, watching them from across a street. Keanu noticed him and walked toward him slowly, his calm steps steady. The man did not move, only smirked. "You think you've won?" he said coldly. "But the world always wants more than the truth. One day it will turn against you again." Keanu's reply was simple but firm. "Maybe it will. But when it does, we will face it together, and that is something you cannot break." The stranger's smirk faded, and he walked away, disappearing into the crowd. When Keanu returned to Sandra's side, she asked softly, "What did he say?" He smiled gently. "Nothing that matters anymore. He has no power over us now." They stood together in the quiet street, the world still loud around them, but their hearts steady. For Sandra, the journey from loneliness to trust had been long and painful, but now she knew she was not alone. For Keanu, the choice to share his truth had reminded him that kindness was not weakness. It was strength. In the weeks that followed, life did not suddenly become perfect. The media still chased stories, the world still whispered, but Sandra and Keanu walked through it together. Every challenge became lighter because they carried it side by side. On a warm evening, as the sun painted the sky with golden light, Sandra turned to him and said, "This was the birthday I wished for, even if I didn't know it. Not the gifts, not the noise, but this, to feel seen, to feel safe, to feel like I belong." Keanu smiled, his calm eyes reflecting the sunset. Then maybe the stranger was wrong. Maybe truth isn't dangerous. Maybe it is the only thing that saves us. And in that moment, both of them knew. The world could twist stories, but it could not break what was real. What they had built was not a scandal. It was a bond born from respect, humility, resilience, and kindness. And that bond, no matter what storms came, would remain unforgettable.